The stars over Earth shimmered like anxious eyes watching from above, and for once, humanity was staring back with a shared gaze. The summit chamber in Geneva, a fusion of neosteel, hologlass, and subtle bioluminescent lighting, was built precisely for this day. This was not a drill, not a speculative treaty, not a probe. This was first contact. Ambassador Reena Patel stood at the center of the circular platform, hands clasped behind her back, shoulders taut. Her voice had always been calm under pressure, but her heart was a percussion instrument now. Earth's first emissary to another species. A woman whose job description included greeting the unknown without flinching. Next to her, Professor Elias Rourke adjusted the translation interface mounted discreetly behind his ear. His gray temples framed a face creased with sleepless nights and too much reading. But his eyes gleamed. This was what he lived for. The ship's descent trajectory is flawless. No weapon signatures. Minimal gravitational disruption. It's beautiful, Reena. Let's just hope they're as friendly as their approach, she replied. Her tone clipped, but laced with a cautious reverence. A deep hum vibrated through the reinforced dome above them. The chamber's upper shell shifted, iris-like, and the alien vessel emerged through a mist veil of electromagnetic shielding. It descended with elegance, more alive than mechanical, its surface resembling bark and glass fused into one. It hovered briefly before extending a gangway made not of metal, but woven threads of some glowing, organic material. The first figure stepped forward, and the room collectively inhaled. It stood nearly 2 meters tall, its frame humanoid but impossibly lean. Its skin, or was it bark, bore a fibrous texture, moving slightly as if breathing. Long, tendril-like appendages extended from its head in place of hair, draping with the grace of willow branches swaying in still air. Its eyes were vast, black, and reflective, planets unto themselves. Identification reads, Kitra, Elias whispered, tapping his earpiece. Linguistic structure already mapping. Their species name, Ilari. Kitra paused at the threshold, then stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time, followed by 2 others, shorter but similar in form. Their long digits folded across their torsos in what must be a respectful gesture. Reena stepped forward, bowing slightly, her movements crisp and deliberate. On behalf of the people of Earth, welcome. We are honored by your presence and seek peace, knowledge, and friendship. A pause followed, too long for human comfort. Then the Ilari emitted a chime from within their chest cavities, followed by sound. Not spoken words, but melodic syllables shaped like song. Rourke's translator adjusted rapidly. Greetings, Earthkin. We come with open resonance. You are different, but not unlike the roots of stars. The chamber erupted in controlled applause. The delegation was led into the inner halls, where glass gardens bloomed with plants from every continent. Earth's biodiversity laid bare in curated harmony. Kitra paused often, trailing fingers along leaves, blinking with what might have been awe. By the end of the first Earth cycle, treaties had been signed for shared research, observational access to low orbit, and full-spectrum cultural exchanges. It had gone better than anyone dared to expect. 3 days later, over a formal meal of synthetic nutrient modules, carefully crafted to avoid offending any biochemistry, Kitra asked a question that did not translate easily. What is PET? Reena looked up mid-sip. The table fell into a brief hush. Could you elaborate? Elias asked. Kitra's eyes darkened slightly, a Ilari sign of intent curiosity. We observed archival footage. A creature lives with you. Not offspring, not labor unit. It is named, protected, loved, yet not essential. Is it servitor? Or kin with reduced function? Reena exchanged a glance with Elias. A pet, she said carefully, is an animal we keep for companionship. They comfort us, amuse us. Some do have tasks like guiding the blind or assisting in therapy, but that's not why we bond with them. It's affection, mutual presence, emotional connection. Keturah's head tilted. A bonded creature, not born of your kind, with no purpose but nearness? Yes, Elias said, smiling slightly. Exactly. The Ilari made a note. Literally, their vocal cords releasing a sound that the translator interpreted as intriguing anomaly detected. Further study requested. We would meet one, Keturah said. Meet one? A pet. The request was simple, but in diplomatic terms, it landed like a tossed wrench into smooth gears. Protocols hadn't covered this. The UN Council debated late into the night. Cultural representatives warned of unpredictability. The Science Council was fascinated. The psychology teams were divided. In the end, it was Rena who made the decision. She chose Max. He wasn't just a dog. He was a veteran's companion. Golden retriever, 6 years old. Trained, gentle, socialized. He had attended parades, hospital visits, even courtrooms. He was a living embodiment of everything they wanted to show: warmth, resilience, love without demand. As the Geneva chamber prepared for the next summit, Max trotted through the polished halls, tail swaying, tongue lolling in an exuberant smile. Elias watched him with a tight-lipped smile. I hope to God the Ilari don't think he's the ambassador. Rena knelt, stroking Max's fur. He might be better than one. He doesn't lie, doesn't posture, just is. Keturah and the Ilari delegation arrived precisely at the appointed hour. This time, their movements were less formal, fluid, curious. The moment they entered, Max's ears perked up. He barked once, joyfully, and padded forward. The Ilari froze. Max paused, sniffed the air, then accelerated. Rena's breath caught. He reached Keturah and leapt, not in aggression, but in joy, aiming to plant a big, wet kiss on the alien's bark-textured face. The moment was etched in stillness. Keturah flinched, not back but sideways, emitting a low harmonic pulse that shimmered the air. Max landed, undeterred, and began circling with tail wags and soft woofs. Rena stepped forward. It's okay, he's just... Keturah raised one hand. So much joy, they murmured, the translator delayed and shaky. Uncontained energy. Proximity without fear. Contact without boundary. The moment passed. The room exhaled. Keturah crouched, one long limb extended. Max licked the tip with a delighted yip. A Ilari aide recorded everything, their notes glowing softly. Rena stood back, watching the impossible unfold. First contact had gone perfectly, but something deeper, something emotional, illogical, human, had just begun, and no one, not even the diplomats, truly understood where it would lead. Keturah stood at the observation deck, gazing silently through the transparent alloy into the vast greenery of the Earth biosphere dome. Light filtered in diffused shafts across his layered skin, highlighting the subtle color changes that rippled down his limbs like wind brushing leaves. The chamber was quiet but never still. Earth was a living, breathing thing, and the Ilari could sense that with every molecule of air. Beside him, the small diplomatic console chimed, signaling an incoming summary report. He ignored it. His mind was still caught in the moment from earlier. The dog Max, with his unfiltered joy and flagrant disregard for formality. In Ilari culture, touch was sacred, controlled, reserved for bonded kin or ritual exchange. To be touched uninvited, especially with moisture and sound, would be grounds for immediate social severance. Yet, he hadn't reacted violently, not even with alarm. The contact had been novel, not entirely unpleasant. Keturah's aides, Isai and Foron, were less convinced. Isai spoke first, her vocal harmonics sharp and clipped. You allowed the creature to coat your dermal layer with enzymes and bacteria. It could have been a dominance display. Foron nodded, his eyes unblinking. Or a test. Biological probing, perhaps. It was erratic. Its tail thrashed like a predator priming for a strike. Keturah was silent. The humans had offered explanations. Affection, playfulness, emotional expression. But the logic was fragmented. The dog had no clear role, no task, and yet the humans had trusted it to engage on their behalf. Even their leader had spoken fondly of its honesty, as if that furry creature somehow exemplified the best of them. Were they hiding? Foron pressed, his fingers coiling slightly. Perhaps nothing, Keturah said slowly. Perhaps everything. Later that day, a private cultural session was arranged in the Geneva Learning Chambers. Elias Rourke had personally volunteered to lead it. He arrived carrying a digital slate filled with recorded materials, centuries of humanity's love affair with animals. Today, he began, his voice calm and confident, I'll be presenting a curated selection of human-animal interactions. Contextualized, of course. Keturah and his aides gathered in front of the display, neural translators at full calibration. The room dimmed, and the first footage began. A grainy black and white video from the early 20th century showed a dog running toward child. The child's face lit up with pure joy. The dog tackled him gently, licking, wagging, circling. Recorded in 1923, Elias said. This was a farm dog named Rosie. No training, no command, just love. More clips followed. A cat curling up beside a grieving widow. A parrot whispering affirmations to a man recovering from trauma. A horse standing silently beside a soldier's grave. These creatures, Elias continued, are not bred solely for function. Some, yes, but many are simply companions. They exist in our lives as constant, unjudging presences. They don't understand our language, but they feel our moods. We don't demand perfection from them, yet we trust them with our hearts. Isai's voice broke the silence. Why do you not fear them? They are smaller, yes, but not entirely predictable. Your records show aggression, bites, even fatalities. Elias nodded. Some animals are dangerous, just like some humans. But the bond we form with pets isn't about absolute safety. It's about connection, vulnerability. It's a trust we give freely, knowing it might be broken. Keturah leaned forward slightly. You risk harm for emotional satisfaction? Every love contains risk, Elias replied, meeting his gaze. The Alari exchanged glances. That phrase resonated in their language like an old song rediscovered. Following the session, a quiet tension began to build within the Alari camp. Foron compiled dozens of notes, tracking inconsistencies in terminology, pet, companion, animal friend, emotional support being. No single definition satisfied their cultural taxonomy. To them, a creature with no defined status was dangerous, socially chaotic. Isai became increasingly unsettled. If they placed this much affection on non-sentient creatures, what does that say about their hierarchy of care? How do they value their own species? What about those outside it? Keturah gave no immediate answer. Instead, he requested a field visit. The humans agreed, if somewhat hesitantly. A modest delegation of Alari were escorted to a suburban district on the edge of Zurich, where they visited a family home. It was a controlled visit, pre-screened, protocol-approved, with embedded translators and observation drones. There, in a warmly lit living room of a small brick house, an elderly woman sat knitting while a fat tabby cat dozed beside her. Two children played a board game on the floor. A Labrador dozed nearby. The scene was still mundane, completely without grandeur. "What function do the creatures serve here?" Isai whispered. "None," Elias replied. "They're just part of the family." The Ilari watched in silence. One of the children dropped a piece from the board game, and the dog lazily stretched, then ambled over and returned it. The girl patted his head, smiling. Something shifted in Ketura's posture. It wasn't immediate understanding, but it was the beginning of something unfamiliar, a weightless disquiet, an itch in the soul, a glimpse into a pattern his kind had never known. Later that night, back aboard their vessel, Ketura reviewed the day's footage alone. The term pet remained alien, insufficient. It was a placeholder for something messier, something more human than words could contain. He tapped into the neural exchange log and recorded a note for the Ilari High Conclave. Preliminary conclusion. Earth species possess emotional bonds with lesser intelligent life, forms that defy utility. Affection is not functionally assigned, but freely given. This construct, pet, represents a paradox of trust without necessity. It challenges our understanding of companionhood. Further analysis is imperative. The message pulsed with quiet urgency before it vanished into the relay system. The following morning, Ketura requested something unexpected. "I wish to witness the creature again." The one named Max. Rena was caught off guard. "You want another meeting?" "Yes," Ketura said, tone unreadable. "But not here. Not in chambers. I wish to see where he resides. Where he exists without performance." Rena hesitated. The request was unusual, but not unreasonable. And something in Ketura's eyes, vast, dark, no longer entirely impassive, suggested this mattered more than he could say aloud. Arrangements were made. As the sun rose the next day, casting golden light across the Swiss countryside, a Ilari ambassador prepared to step into a small backyard. Waiting on the grass, tail thumping against the earth, was Max. And for the first time, Ketura felt something disturbingly close to anticipation. Max bounded across the grass with unrestrained joy, his golden coat catching the morning sun in bright arcs as he leapt toward the arriving delegation. Ketura remained motionless, his long limbs folded neatly, tendrils swaying slightly in the breeze. He watched the animals approach without flinching, though Foran and Isai flanked him with rigid posture and unreadable expressions. Max came to a halt just short of Ketura, tail whipping in wide arcs, tongue lolling, eyes bright with curiosity. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just a spontaneous moment of silent recognition. The dog stepped forward, sniffed the alien's elongated hand, then plopped onto the grass, tail still thumping. "This is his space," Rena said from the side of the garden, her voice low, almost reverent. "It's not a lab, not a performance, just his home." Ketura crouched slowly, bringing himself closer to Max's level. The Ilari anatomy made the motion graceful, fluid, like branches bowing to a gentle wind. Max nudged forward, sniffed again, then laid his head on Ketura's foot as if declaring a fragile truce. The alien didn't move. "He accepts you," Elias said, standing behind Rena. "It's not something we teach them. They decide." The words echoed in Ketura's mind like a harmonic dissonance. They decide. In Ilari culture, decisions were systemic, layered in social permissions and purpose. No lesser creature would be entrusted with autonomy. Yet here was a creature, uncommanded, forming its own judgment of value. Ketura extended a hand, slowly, hesitantly. His long fingers brushed the soft fur on Max's head. The texture was unlike anything he'd known, warm, responsive, layered with oils and scent. Max blinked slowly, a soft huff escaping his snout, and stayed still beneath the touch. Isai finally spoke. We risk contamination. Microbial incompatibility. No signs of aggression, Foran added. But the unpredictability remains. It is not unpredictable, Ketura said, voice low. It is unconstrained. Rena offered a thin smile. You're beginning to understand him. Ketura looked up, his eyes reflecting the clear sky. No, I'm beginning to understand you. The next 40 minutes passed in unexpected tranquility. Max escorted the alien delegates around his small domain. A few trees, a shallow pond, a scattering of toys. He made no attempt to perform. He simply existed in their company, his presence acting as a strange bridge between two species that had only just begun to scrape the surface of each other's minds. Inside the adjacent house, Ketura was offered tea, non-toxic, plant-based, caffeine-free, and he accepted it out of respect. He sat on the floor in traditional Alari repose while Elias and Rena took seats nearby. You don't seem disturbed by Max anymore, Elias noted. Disturbed? Ketura tilted his head. No. Disoriented perhaps. He lacks internal filters. He shares presence without hesitation. That's called trust, Rena said. Trust, Ketura repeated, as if sampling the word for taste. You apply this concept often. You trust this creature, yet it lacks your language, your laws. Why? Because he never pretends to be something he's not, Elias replied. He doesn't lie. He doesn't manipulate. He's pure response, pure intention. Ketura was silent for a long time. Outside, Max barked once, chasing a floating seed through the air, and the sound brought a faint, curious hum from the alien's chest. It wasn't laughter, not quite, but close. Later that day, the Alari requested a deeper analysis of the human-pet dynamic, but not from diplomats or scientists. They asked to speak with ordinary citizens, families, children, veterinarians, rescuers. They requested no pre-written statements, no rehearsed lines. The next few days were a whirlwind of encounters. A 12-year-old girl showed them her therapy bunny and explained how hugging him helped her breathe easier when her anxiety took hold. An elderly man described how his cat had stayed beside him through chemotherapy, only leaving his lap when he slept. A firehouse in Berlin demonstrated how a Dalmatian alerted the crew to a gas leak before any sensor did. The stories varied in detail, but not in theme. Loyalty, comfort, emotional symbiosis. Over and over again, the message repeated in countless dialects and voices. These creatures mattered, not because they were useful, but because they made people feel less alone. Isai, once skeptical, began recording extended logs, her tone no longer clinical. Foran grew quieter, though his data packets grew in size and depth. Ketura remained publicly neutral, yet the subtle harmonics of his voice had changed. By the 6th day, Max had become more than a subject. He was an accepted member of the diplomatic cohort. He was allowed in controlled council meetings, where he sat obediently beside Rena, panting softly, occasionally offering a paw to unsuspecting aides. The Alari, initially hesitant, no longer flinched at his presence. It was Foran who noticed it first. He listens to emotional tone, he said after one session. When voices rise in tension, he moves closer to the source. He disrupts conflict with nearness. Empathy, Elias confirmed. Foran frowned. But it is not learned, not imitative. It appears inherent. Ketura spoke softly. Then perhaps empathy is not a higher function after all. Perhaps it is a primal one we have forgotten. The words stirred something unspoken between the humans and the Alari. It was not a declaration, not a treaty, but a recognition. That night, Ketura asked for time alone. Rena granted it, though she left Max behind. In the twilight stillness of the Earth Biosphere Dome, Ketura sat beneath a canopy of trees. Max approached him slowly, respectfully, and curled up beside him without instruction. Ketura reached out, resting one hand gently on Max's back, feeling the quiet thrum of life beneath fur. "My people see power in restraint," Ketura said aloud. "We have cultivated silence, precision, logic, but we have lost softness." Max didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ketura exhaled, a sound that vibrated like wind in deep branches. "You are not lesser, small one. You are whole. You are enough." Above them, stars bloomed in the artificial sky, and for the first time, Ketura did not feel like a visitor. When he returned to his vessel the next day, he submitted an encrypted communiqué to the Ilari High Conclave. Behavioral assessment complete. Species possesses capacity for authentic emotional bond with non-sentient beings. These bonds are not decorative or indulgent. They're central to their societal and psychological stability. To dismiss such connections is to misunderstand their essence. Recommendation: reevaluate empathy not as anomaly, but as function. He paused before sending, then added one final line. Request: initiate research into interspecies emotional exchange, beginning with Max. The message transmitted with a soft hum, disappearing into the deep fabric of interstellar code. Back on Earth, Max chased a squirrel across the garden, barking with delight. And for the first time since the Ilari had arrived, the distance between species did not seem quite so vast. The final days of the Ilari delegation's visit unfolded with a kind of quiet momentum, as though the atmosphere itself had softened under the accumulated weight of shared experience. Where once protocols governed every interaction, now unspoken understandings flowed between gestures, glances, and the presence of a certain golden-furred mediator who had, inexplicably, become the soul of the proceedings. Max now trotted beside Ketura with the casual confidence of a veteran diplomat. Each day, as the Ilari ambassador moved between embassies, observation sites, and public forums, Max followed. Not as a pet, not as a symbol, but as something stranger and truer, a companion without official status, and yet somehow central to the mission's outcome. There were skeptics. Voices rose in the higher echelons of Earth's administrative bodies, questioning whether the growing Ilari human rapport had become too emotionally entangled. Emotional compromise, they argued, was dangerous in diplomacy. But even those voices quieted when faced with the tangible results. Tensions eased, miscommunications diminished, and previously stalled treaties began to show signs of life. Still, not all Ilari were convinced. When a secondary fleet arrived in orbit, led by the pragmatic overseer Talrem, the tone of the mission shifted. Talrem had not walked through Earth's gardens. He had not sat with grieving humans or watched Max interrupt a dispute with nothing more than a paw on a knee. He came with questions of power, hierarchy, and long-term viability. Ketura stood before the overseer with practiced calm, his limbs still, his vocal harmonics neutral. Yet something in his core had changed. He carried the echo of a soft bark in his memory and the warmth of fur beneath his fingers. "You speak of emotional integration," Talrem said, "of cross-species affection. But affection is not infrastructure. Love is not policy." "No," Ketura replied. "But affection builds what policy cannot." Talrem's mandibles clicked. "Explain. In all your readings, have you asked why these creatures, these humans, survive despite their internal chaos? Their inconsistent logic, their fragile alliances, their exposure to emotional volatility. They adapt. They consume. They multiply." Ketura's voice dropped. "They endure because they bond, not only with each other, with those outside themselves. Their capacity to extend care to the unfamiliar is not a flaw. It is the foundation of their strength. You speak as if one creature altered your entire analysis. I speak as one who has touched what they touch, and understood, at last, that empathy is not ornamental. It is structural. Talrem was silent. Then, without acknowledgement, he turned and dismissed the ambassador. The message was clear. The Ilari conclave would decide, and Keturah's evolving philosophy, though heard, would not be accepted without scrutiny. That evening, Keturah sat in his quarters aboard the primary vessel, watching Max through the clear viewing panel as the dog explored the docking bay with unshakable curiosity. Each new surface was a wonder. Every sound, an invitation. He did not analyze, he experienced. His trust in the world was both instinctive and, in its own way, revolutionary. Max trotted over to the viewing glass, tail wagging, and pressed his nose gently to it. Keturah rose, placing a hand against the opposite side. A quiet moment passed between them, not of ownership, not of training, but of mutual recognition. The following morning, Elias and Rena arrived with formal expressions and a message from the Global Council. They're willing to take the next step, Rena said. A limited interspecies behavioral program. Earth volunteers. Select Ilari. Controlled environments. Long-term observation. Keturah nodded. On Earth or in shared space? Both, Elias replied. It won't be easy. Some nations are still wary. Some of your people, more than a few, will resist. Resistance is expected, but movement is enough. Later that week, at the formal departure ceremony in Geneva, Keturah stood with Max at his side. The moment was ceremonial, but the connection between the ambassador and the animal defied any script. Talrem gave a speech, impersonal and efficient. Elias followed with warmth and hope. Keturah, when it came time, chose few words. Trust, he said simply, does not come from species or science. It begins here, he touched his chest, and is confirmed here. He reached down and rested his hand on Max's back. That evening, as the ships prepared for departure, Rena approached Keturah by the vessel's ramp. She wore civilian clothing now, her diplomatic badge removed. He's going with you? She asked, nodding at Max. Keturah looked down at the dog, who sat obediently beside his foot. Yes, the first participant in the interspecies empathy exchange. Rena raised an eyebrow. You're taking a dog to an alien civilization that doesn't have pets. He is not a pet, Keturah replied. He is a challenge. Good luck explaining that to the conclave. I don't intend to explain. I intend to show. Rena crouched beside Max, scratched behind his ears. You've got your work cut out for you, buddy. Max licked her hand once, then turned back to Keturah, as if ready. The vessel ascended into Earth's upper atmosphere without fanfare. Inside, Max explored his new surroundings with characteristic enthusiasm. The Ilari crew kept a respectful distance, unsure whether to treat him as animal or ambassador. But slowly, curiosity overcame caution. One of the younger engineers extended a cautious hand. Max sniffed it, then leaned in with a wag of approval. A technician set aside a scarf she'd been weaving from heat-dispersing fibers. Max promptly dragged it to a corner and curled up with it, snoring gently. At first, the Ilari were puzzled, but in time, they began to understand. He didn't need to speak to communicate. He didn't need rank to be respected. He just needed to be present. And presence, they were beginning to learn, had a language of its own. Months later, deep within the crystalline archives of Ilaria Prime, a new category was added to the relational codex. It had no direct translation, only a glyph, a spiral wrapping around a circle with an open line at the base. The description read, a being without shared language, yet bound by trust. A presence that alters the emotional field through nearness. A companion who does not demand understanding, but offers it freely. Not servant. Not kin. Something else. Designation, max type. Status, ongoing observation. Priority, high. Back on Earth, a child asked her father why the stars seemed to sparkle brighter lately. He told her the truth. Because something small and golden went up there, and it mattered. The child smiled, and her cat purred in her lap. Far above, in a world of logic and silence, something had shifted. Not broken. Opened.